Acts chapter 17, verses 22 to 34. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. And some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. And from Acts 19, 8-10. Paul entered the synagogue and spoke boldly there for 3 months, arguing persuasively about the kingdom of God. But some of them became obstinate. They refused to believe and publicly maligned the way. So Paul left them. He took the disciples with him and had discussions daily in the lecture hall of Tyrannus. This went on for 2 years, so that all the Jews and Greeks who lived in the province of Asia heard the word of the Lord.
Look, thank you for having me. You had no say in it, but thank you anyway. It's great to be here. It's great to be with you. I feel like you've got the second-class person now because, I don't have a balloon hat. I've got no string to throw around. That was awesome, wasn't it? That was fantastic. Can I just put that down there because otherwise I'm going to bang it off at some point. So that would be great. Look, firstly, I want to say to you as a church, and I want to say it publicly, I want to thank you for, in one sense, releasing Scott to do what he did with Unearthed. Scott, your pastor, your minister, he primarily drove what happened with Unearthed on Thursday night. So if you were there and you saw all of these people and you saw all of these churches getting together, that was primarily through the ministry of Scott. And I want to say publicly thank you. We had about 780 people register for the event. Now, some don't turn up because they, can't, and others do turn up and don't register. And we normally find that's probably a fair indication of roughly how many people came on the night. And I can tell you that from what I know so far, in terms of the people that filled out a response card, either online or on paper, around 20 people or thereabouts gave their life to the Lord on that night. Now, is that a good day? That's a good day, isn't it? That is a good day. So please be praying for that. There's a bunch of work that has to happen in getting that information back to the pastors in the region and so forth. But when the Bible says heaven celebrates one, well, 20 is a pretty good party going. So please be thankful for that. That would be fantastic. Do you remember what it was like to get a report card at school? Now, some of you it was relatively recently, others of you it's a few years ago and you have to sort of think back a little bit. But in my era at school, you got given the report card in a manila folder on the last day of school, right near the end of day, and you had to take it home and give it to your parents. Do you remember, does anybody else remember having to do that? And if you were like me, and you probably were much better than me, but if you were like me, one of the things that you hoped was that your mum forgot to ask you for the report card. I would leave it in my bag for as long of the holidays as I could because I knew that when she read it, she was not going to be overly thrilled with the answer. Now, my wife isn't with me on this trip. Mia and Jade are here, and if you remember, pray for me. It's hard work being with them. Even today, they gave me the seat with the arms on it because they said old people need that to get up. So be praying for that. But my wife's not here today. But she's a wonderful woman, and I was thinking, I wonder what her report cards were like. And so you know that whole ads on TV, the compare the pair. It's about superannuation, and they compare. So I want you to compare my wife's Year 12 leaving letter, parts of it, with my Year 10 report because I left at the end of school in Year 10. So here's a little bit of Annette's leaving letter, her report, as it were. Annette has been very conscientious and a cooperative student. She adopted a mature and keen attitude to her studies. It goes on to say, in class, she showed an avid interest and worked to the best of her ability. It goes on to say, and she's very friendly and most pleasant young lady. She's sensible, polite, well-spoken, and possesses a happy disposition. And in her dealings with teachers, she's been reliable, considerate. She was elected school prefect. It just keeps going. It just keeps going like this, right? And the last point is, in future employment, Annette would be honest and sincere and undertake her role in a most capable and trustworthy manner. Now, if you were a parent, would you, like that? That's like, I've got to be honest, and I know this online, but my boys probably won't. I never got a report card like that as a parent. I never got my boys bringing home that report card. That would be an unreal report card. Let me share you some of my Year 10 comments. From my year advisor, whilst Brendan has made overall satisfactory progress, he has the capacity to do very much better. My technical drawing teacher said, Brendan must complete all sheets to maximise his assessment. He is capable of a much improved assessment. And particularly my last one was of one of my favourite teachers at school, but she was pretty blunt about it. She said, Brendan is capable of a much better result. And she goes on, his quick wit needs to be tempered with more solid concentration for longer periods of time. Now, that was a very fair reflection of my schooling years, I must admit. But here's my question. If the church got a report card, what would the subjects be? And what would we be graded on? If the church got a report card, what would it look like and what would be seen as the sort of subjects, the areas that we would be marked on in inverted commas? Now, I want to stop for a minute and say this. We are coming to what I'm about to say from the position of being loved by God. There's this great book that was a fictional book about this guy's encounter with Jesus, and in it he has this encounter with Jesus, and he says, well, what do I do now? I've had this encounter with Jesus. What do I do? And Jesus turns to him in this fictional book and just says, learn to live loved. So whatever I say from here is coming from the point of view of we are learning to live loved. We are already loved. But in this report card, if I was saying it, then I think some of Jesus' last words indicate the things that would be on that report card. And in Jesus' last words, we have two things. We have Matthew 28, where it says what? Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And in Acts 1, lining up with your Acts series, in Acts chapter 1, it says this. It says what? It says, you will receive power and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. So the report card would, I think, have two things in it. We are to make disciples and we are to take the gospel to a world that doesn't understand Jesus' good news yet. Now, there's a bunch of stuff under that about how we do it and what does disciples look like and what are the things that we'd want to put in. But essentially, I think, as a church, and I'm not talking about your church, I'm talking about as the church, we are called to make disciples and we are called to take the gospel to a world that doesn't understand Jesus is good news. And so today what we're going to do is focus on some of Jesus' last words about taking from Acts, and then we're going to look at the passages in Acts 17 and 19 about how then the early church took this good news and took it to the world around them. Does that make sense? I need somebody to say yes. Okay. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to link in with the series. And today's is around reaching the city. And what does that look like? And the way to reach the city, I think, firstly, and if we change the slide, firstly, is to recognise the world's spiritual hunger. Now, my wife, as I said, isn't here. She's born to Anglo-Australian parents, but her parents went to India and were on mission for 15 years over there, doing a whole bunch of stuff. And so my wife was born in India and did boarding school over there. And so we went back to India for her school centenary celebrations before our kids were born, 25 years ago, whatever it was, a bit more than that. And we went back to her school centenary. And we'd been nearly 3 weeks in India, and we'd been really immersed in the culture. We had stayed with her family's family friends. We had, stayed in those spaces. We had eaten local food. We had, done all of those things. So we had immersed ourselves. We were the only two white people on a bus. No other white people were on a bus. They would take TikToks or others, tuk-tuks or other things. TikToks, that's funny. Anyway. They would take little scooters or other stuff. We really wanted to be in the culture, and we wanted to not be, so we would, and there's this video of me driving scooters around the village where Annette was born with Annette on the back and all this sort of stuff. We did all of that. And the last night we were there, we'd gone back to a major city to do a little bit of touristy stuff before we flew out. And the last night we were there, we just wanted plain Western food. Like we'd been 3 weeks immersing ourselves in the culture, had a wonderful time, but we just wanted plain Western food. And it embarrasses me to say publicly that we saw a sign for McDonald's. And, I'll eat some junk food, but I don't particularly love McDonald's, but I will eat it, because it's easy. But we'd seen this sign for McDonald's, right? And it was like we just wanted plain Western food. And literally, now this big place, we had walked through this city basically going, hi, do you know where the McDonald's is? No? Okay. Hi, do you know where the McDonald's... And we would literally walk around this city just asking people where the McDonald's was until eventually we kind of got pointed in the semi-right direction. We eventually found our way and had McDonald's. Now, a little side point. Here's a tip for you if you haven't been to India yet. I wanted a Big Mac. Now, India treats a cow as sacred. So they don't have a Big Mac. They have like a veggie burger. That was very disappointing after 3 weeks and wanting a Big Mac. But anyway, point is this. On a much more profound level, there are seekers in this world. There are people that are walking around asking far more profound questions than where is the McDonald's. There are people that are walking around and maybe not saying it out loud, but they are seeking. They are seeking things and answers to questions like, who am I? What is important? Is there life after death? Is there a God? And if there is a God, what is that God like? There are people that are seeking him. I mean, we've got in the Gospels, we've got John, in John chapter 3, we've got Nicodemus, don't we? What does he do? He goes to Jesus. When does he go to Jesus? At night. He goes to Jesus at night asking Jesus questions. He's seeking something, and so he wants to know some answers, and so he goes looking for them. And there's even seekers today. Let me tell you about one. There's a lady called Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Ayaan Hirsi Ali was a radical Muslim lady. Now, some of you will know this story, some of you won't. You can look it up later, you can go and check it out. But Ayaan Hirsi Ali was a prominent Muslim, radical Muslim. And about, a bunch of years ago, she essentially converted from Islam to being an atheist. Now, Hone Urshali was part of the whole new atheist tribe of Dawkins and Hitchens and those people. Do you know some of those names maybe, right? So Hone Urshali became this prominent figure in the new atheists, arguing there is no God, God is dead, yeah, it's all rubbish, go away, do your own thing, whatever, right? So here is Hone Urshali. She's a Somali radical Muslim who becomes an atheist and part of the prominence of the new atheist. And here's what she wrote in an article last year. I have turned to Christianity because ultimately I found life without any spiritual solace unendurable. Indeed, they're very nearly self-destructive. Atheism failed to answer the simple question, what is the meaning and the purpose of life? Who would have thought that a bunch of years ago this radical Muslim would go searching and find Jesus? Who would have thought Paul, the one persecuting, would find Jesus? Who would have thought some of the people in this room, some of us, we might have been voted at some point least likely to be a Christian. When I went back to my school reunion at 20 years or whatever, it was a long time ago, and I was pastoring the church back then, and I went back and, I'd be talking to some of the teachers came and other students, and now some people find out this in these days in Facebook and that, but some teachers and that would go, oh, what do you do now? And I go, oh, I'm a pastor of a church. Oh, okay. And they weren't belittling my calling, they were just a bit shocked that it had happened, and who would have thought that those people, but there's a whole bunch of us in the room that in some way, in some time, at some point, have gone searching and seeking for the answers that we've found in Christ, haven't we? That's partly why we're here today. And so there is this idea that there is people searching and seeking the lost. Now, let me tell you a couple of stories. There's a guy, and I don't think Scott shared the first one. I think he shared the second one. But there's a guy called Tim Piesi who's a pastor at a church in Crossway in Melbourne, and they run this thing called Building a Discipling Culture. Now, I'm going to butcher what they do. They do it very well, but I'm just going to try and give you the bare minimum. They encourage you to pray about your friends. They ask you out of your friend, any connections you have, to pray and see if you kind of sense God speaking to you about a person of peace, somebody who might be open to something of the good news of Jesus. And so you pray and you get 3 names, and then you basically pray about it and you go and speak to those people and you simply say this to your non-Christian, and I want you to be clear, your non-Christian friends, that 3 of your non-Christian connections you go to and you say, would you like to read the Bible with me every week? Now, I'm sitting there, like pastors, we're meant to be the people full of faith and, passion and belief. And I'm sitting there going, there is no way that works. No way. What a ridiculous way to go. They say, and they've done it for a long time now, 1 in 3 non-Christians say yes to reading the scriptures with a friend of theirs. There's a whole bunch of people out there seeking for something, and they are more open to a conversation about faith than often we give them credit for. There's another quote that I think I've got a slide for that talks about nearly 4 in 10 Australians have said that they would go to church with somebody, a Christian who they knew well. And another 20% nearly would say they are open to the fact. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because, like school wasn't my strong point and maths was not my strong point within my schooling, which was not my strong point. But that means nearly 6 in 10 Australians who know a Christian personally are at the very least warm to an invitation about something about faith. There is a whole bunch of people in your community that are seeking. Paul, when he's dealing with those in Athens, he says it like this: I walked around and I looked carefully at your objects of worship. I even found this altar to an unknown God. Well, let me tell you about this unknown God, he then goes on to say. Now, the problem is There's a whole bunch of people in our society seeking God. Now, some of their unknown gods are not that helpful, and we don't like them, and we might even find it a bit offensive. But if we can push through that, we can enter a conversation to help seekers find Jesus. And so what I want to say to you is this, that when we are looking at reaching the city, we've got to recognise whether people express it healthily or unhealthily, there is a whole bunch of Australians saying, what's the meaning of life? Is there a God? And if there's a God, what are they like? And they are just waiting for somebody like you and me to help. So, that's a lot of me talking for a moment. I like to break it up a little bit because, let's be honest. What I wanted to do, I've got a question for you. Can you go to the questions for me? I want you to turn to the person next to you. I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes, so it's not going to go for long. I want you to turn to the person next to you and just have a quick conversation about these two things. What makes it hard to share your faith? And what could you change or think differently to help you get over that? Does that make sense? So what makes it hard? And what could you do or think differently to help you get over that? So we're going to just spend a couple of minutes now doing that. You ready? Go. Talk to the people around you. Make sure, if you haven't, that everybody gets a bit of a say. So keep sharing that around. Okay. Now, I'm sure some of you could talk on that for a long time, and you can at some point. I suspect most of us probably would fall into one of a few groups about why we find it hard, and most of us probably understand that. And so I'm not going to ask for that. But here's what I want to do. Mia's got the microphone down here, and what I'm going to do is get her to kind of run. I want one or two of you, if you're willing, to share what's one thing that you could do or think differently to help you overcome your reluctance or a person's reluctance to share your faith. So Mia, if you stand up, and somebody will put their hand up in a minute, I'm sure, and help me out. Otherwise, I'll start singing 10, 9, 8, and you don't want that, okay? So who would like to share something of what could you do or think differently to help you overcome that? Who wants to do that? Yep, up the back there, Mia. And make sure the next person's down here so that we make Mia run from one end to the other a lot. So somebody down there, get ready. No. Yes.
One of the things that I think what we all should do is pray before you actually start any of this. Have that prayer base behind you and know that have God with you, helping you. Don't just walk in and start saying, read the Bible and I think this is great and so on. I think there's that prayer should be there.
Amen. Thank you so much. Mayor, there's somebody at the back there near the sound system.
Hi. I would just like to say I agree with you. That's particularly ask God first, be led by the Spirit and not just go head on. And I speak from experience.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Somebody else want to share something that you need to think or do differently to get over that fear? Who else wants to say? Yeah, yep, there's one down. Oh, yeah, there's one there and then one down here. Yep.
I think one of the main things is you can't shove Jesus down someone's throat.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to get the interest.
Yes.
And when you've got the interest, then you can, then you can have a conversation. And that's the important thing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sam. Just as you're getting ready to hear, there's part of the interesting statistics of this, that basically a whole bunch of non-Christians were asked, did they know a Christian? 90% said yes, they knew a Christian. And then they asked them, what do you think of that Christian? Now, their top 5 responses, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but they were like loving, loyal, kind, generous, something else. And their bottom 5 were negative ones, like small-minded or bigoted or whatever the words were. So in other words, the person who knows a Christian primarily thinks of them in positive terms, which is quite interesting. Now, they don't say that about the church, which is just lack of awareness, but they say it about you, the people that you know. Sorry, go on.
I think one of the ways to do it is to share about what Jesus has done in my life.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for me to say, this is the change in my life. And I think that's a positive way.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's so powerful, isn't it? So it's about sharing what the change in your life. I mean, what does Acts 1 say? Be a witness. A witness is somebody that goes, there's Jesus, and here's what he's like in my life. So the cool thing is that to share Jesus, you don't have to be like somebody else, do you? Now, I know for some of you, what I'm doing right now is the absolute scariest thing in the world, right? The thought of being up front publicly speaking is just like, my goodness, I would prefer to die than do that, The great thing is you don't have to be like anybody else. All you have to do is share how Jesus has made a difference in your life. Thank you, Mayor, for taking that around. I appreciate it. So here's my second point. If the first point is look for, recognise the world's spiritual hunger, then the second point is simply this: just keep swimming. Now, in the same way that Colin Buchanan was ingrained into my children's, like who put Colin on the car on repeat for journeys and all that sort of stuff? We did. When my children were little, Finding Nemo was one of the movies that was out, and so I watched that about 1,000 times. And in it, if you don't know the story of Finding Nemo, I promise you, it's been out so long, I'm not giving anything away. Okay, but Finding Nemo, pardon me. There's Nemo, he's lost his parents, and he's finding his way through life, and he finds this fish called Dory. And Dory's talking to him, Nemo's all upset, and here's the interaction. Dory says, when life gets you down, what have you got to do? Who remembers what her answer is then? Just keep swimming. Do you want me to sing you that song? I can sing you that song as well, but just keep swimming. See, the Apostle Paul, at this point, has had some great wins and some great losses, but he just kept swimming. I mean, think about it for a moment. We're in the middle of Paul's second missionary journey. We're in the middle of Paul's second missionary journey, and you can look that up for yourself at some point and have a bit of a look. But, we're in the middle of Paul's second missionary journey. And he's finding some great successes, but he's also finding great persecution and hardship. There are some great wins, and there are some, in a sense, great losses. Look at some of these passages in the book of Acts. In Athens, some mocked him, and others wanted to hear more. And a few believed. Or in Acts 19, it says, some became stubborn and spoke evil of the way. But then in Acts 19, it goes on to say, but he did this for 2 years, and Jews and Greeks who lived in the area of province heard the word of the Lord. So, what's my point? My point is, that with Paul, sometimes it went really well. You know, like he hangs, he stays, he preaches, people come to faith, there's all this great stuff going on. And then, equally, at other points, he's run out of a town. My point is this, that not every conversation that you have about faith in Jesus will go amazingly, thank you so much, will go amazingly with everybody that you speak to. Just expect that it won't always go amazing. But equally, expect that sometimes it will. That sometimes it'll be okay. The interesting thing about that building a discipling culture, reading the Bible quote that I read earlier, was that they go on to say that the other two people that said no thank you to reading the Bible, they still continued a friendship with. In other words, it didn't break their friendship to ask them a question. And so here, Paul just keeps swimming. He keeps sharing faith as he goes. In the Old Testament, there are these examples in Joshua chapter 4 of what they call memorial stones. And look it up later, I won't read it to you now, but they're crossing the Jordan into the promised land. They're told to take these stones and set them up on the edge of the bank so that they're a memorial. And they're asked, well, why are we doing that? And they say, well, to serve as a sign among you, but also in the future when your children ask, what do these stones mean, you can tell them. So in other words, they were to set up, they're crossing the river from here to here, and when they get over here, they're to set up this pile of rocks so that one, as they're going down there, hanging around, they can kind of go, oh, that's right, that's what we remember. But it's also so that when a generation comes after them, and says, hey, Mum and Dad, what do these stones mean? They can say, well, let me tell you about this God that took us across here and did this. And they can tell the stories of God again to the people that come after them. And the devastating consequence is this, that one generation later, in Judges chapter 2, it says, after that generation had been gathered to their ancestors, that's the one that built these memorial stones, another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord or what he'd done for Israel. One generation is all it took for those that had crossed into the promised land to forget the God that they followed. One generation. There is this call on you and me to look for the spiritual hunger around us. And there is this call on you and me to pass on the faith to those around us. I want to finish by sharing a story with you. I know the band's going to play some songs in a moment, but Jade, can I get you to come up for now and start playing underneath? That would be cool. I want to tell you about this man. If you show the photo of that next guy. His name is Carlos Kaiser. Carlos Kaiser was a Brazilian, now I'll call it soccer player. He's a football player, soccer player, right? He's a Brazilian football player. And he's pretty good. Like he's better than most, but he's not amazing. Anyway, he's playing football in Brazil and a Mexican team comes over. And this is a true story. I mean, I haven't gone AI generate me a Brazilian-looking football player. That's a real person. And Carlos Kaiser got brought into this Mexican football team. Now, this is a really long story, and I'm not going to share it all. But basically, here's what Carlos Kaiser works out. He works out he's pretty good at football, but not really good enough to make a living from it. Like, he's pretty good, better than most of the kids maybe, but when he gets to this level, he knows he's not going to make it. But here's the thing, he really loves the lifestyle of a professional football player. Money, girls, parties, all the stuff that comes with it. And so he's going like, I want to be a professional football player, but I'm not really good enough. So what he does, he fakes an injury. And so what happens is he fakes this injury, and what happens is for the years that come and follow, he goes to a new club after new club and he fakes an injury. And what he does, he gets in really good. So he goes to the team owner and he becomes really good friends and he does all of these things and everybody loves him because he's a great bloke, but he's actually not playing. And at one point, there's in his story, he goes, the owner of the team who's paying him a lot of money to sit on the bench, the owner of the team basically says to the coach, if you don't put him on today, you're fired. So the coach comes up to Carlos Kaiser and goes, look, I've got to put you on because if not, we've got to do it. So Carlos Kaiser's warming up on the sideline. And he thinks to himself, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. And so then what he does, he jumps the fence and starts a fight in the crowd. And afterwards, he's asked by the media, what happened? And he goes, well, this is what he says. He says, they were saying bad things about the owner, and I wanted to defend the team owner because I love him so much. And the team owner replies, thank you. Now, Carlos Kaiser played football from 1979 to 1992. 13 years Carlos Kaiser played football, professional football, and he never played 1 minute of time on the pitch. Jesus, my brothers and my sisters, points out that many of us can at times be like Carlos Kaiser. We want to be in the team. We want to put on the gear. We want to sit on the bench. But when it actually comes to it, we don't want to go and play the game. And Jesus says to us that the harvest is plentiful and that the workers are few. And my challenge to you today is this. Are you willing to dedicate yourself to being a witness for Christ and to help share your faith? Now, we do that in really normal ways. It's not like we just walk around going, hi, do you know Jesus? Hi, do you know Jesus? I mean, Mel, who was here earlier, I went riding yesterday and I went with a whole bunch of people. I went and had coffee with them afterwards. They asked me what I'm in town for. I say roughly what I'm in town for. I don't go too heavy on it. I just kind of say, I'm in town. I'm doing this stuff with some churches. And so what happens? Her dad goes home and goes, hey, I think there was this guy that was as part of this unearthed group that, I was riding with today. And now I'm not saying I shared the whole gospel with him. I'm just saying it's just another connection point. We're normal human beings. We're not looking around, just to, hammer people all the time. But Jesus calls us and he says, will you be that man? Will you be that woman who steps out of your comfort zone, who overcomes your fear, who crosses barriers to help people who currently don't understand Jesus' good news, to help them understand that? Will you be that person who hears the last words of Jesus to be a witness and says with the prophet Isaiah, when he overhears God saying, well, who'll go? And Isaiah says what? Here am I, send me.